So, I've been playing Exoprimal. I didn't even hear about this game until a friend talked to me about it, so I guess the marketing for it was lacking. In any case, I've played this game a fair amount. Enough to complete the base story and unlock every playable frame currently available. And now that I've done all that, I felt compelled to talk about my experience with the game and my thoughts on it. So here we go. I don't want to delve into spoilers or anything, so I'm just going to quickly talk about the story. Oddly enough, this game has a story, but there's not a designated story mode. Instead, you sort of just turn bits and pieces of story at a time with every multiplayer match that you play. This makes it feel extremely disconnected from the gameplay. The story itself is, well, I would not give it any awards personally. Like I said, no spoilers in case somebody does happen to care about that, so instead I'm just going to talk about this. Whatever this thing is. This weird story wheel is how you can tell how much of the story you've uncovered. It's the most convoluted and over-designed way to progress a story that I've personally ever seen, and honestly I laughed about it for my entire time playing through it. I think the story mode feels really tacked on and unnecessary in a game that's strictly multiplayer, but I guess it doesn't take away from the experience at least. Well, kind of. The one extremely unfortunate thing is that your progression through this unclear story mode actually affects your gameplay. The further you are in the story, the more types of dinosaurs you'll start to see. Mob packs will become much more dense, you'll get access to the 10-player raids, and mission types will be more varied. And none of that is explicitly said anywhere in the game. It's such a bizarre thing to just gloss over, as it's something that you can look forward to as you progress through more matches, and it would really only serve to give players motivation to keep playing and unlocking all of those facets. At the end of the day, it's not the worst thing ever, but it definitely is one of my more negative impressions of the game. Alright, with that out of the way, let's move on to the meat of Exoprimal, the gameplay. As of now, there are 10 exosuits that you can pilot in these matches. Each one has different strengths and weaknesses, as well as a more general purpose that's defined in one of 3 roles: assault, tank, and support. Every frame is unique from each other, having different types of attack, utility, and mobility options. And, for the most part, there are times where each of them feels like they have opportunities to shine. For instance, timing Murasame's parry on a big attack and then following it up with his counter-attack. Or when you land Deadeye's grenade ability inside of a huge swarm of mobs. Pulling a ton of mobs together with your vortex as skywaves so that your team can shred them apart. Freezing or paralyzing mobs at just the right time, or controlling a defense point with shields and taunts. There are a lot of ways to feel like you're really contributing to the team in Exoprimal. When you queue up, the game matches you with 4 other teammates and then throws you into scenarios where you'll face off against hordes of dinosaurs. Using guns, missiles, lasers, and various melee weapons, you'll cleave through masses of enemies and every so often against large dinosaurs that require a focused effort to take down. The game is non-restrictive, allowing players to pick whatever suit they want, even if it's already on the team. Additionally, you can even swap suits at any point during a match if you feel you need a different one that would fare better for a given situation. While the lack of restrictions feels great since you can always play whatever exosuit you particularly enjoy, it does run into a few hitches if you're looking to have a well-rounded team. When you queue up for a match, the game doesn't take into account whatever suit you have picked out as your default. This means that you can end up on teams with multiple healers or tanks, or a lack of both. And, if you're actually hoping to win a match with random players, you're likely going to have to swap off of whatever suit you were initially hoping to play. To be fair, I really don't know if the game has enough of an active player base at the moment to support separating queues to at least factor in roles, so I do understand why it just throws you in with complete disregard for what you were hoping to play as. An additional complication to this comes from the lack of ability to type to your teammates. Exoprimal opts instead for communication either through in-game voice comms, or by using predetermined phrases and emotes. If you're not willing to hop into the in-game voice lobby, then you're not really able to discuss who will swap roles, or coordinate more complicated strategies. While Exoprimal doesn't necessarily require such coordination for the most part, there are times where it would be helpful, particularly in scenarios such as the game's raids. It'd be nice to figure out who will be doing what, or going where, without needing to get on a voice call. I guess since I just mentioned the raids, now's a good time to talk about Exoprimal's absolutely wonky game modes. So, when you first look at the game and see that it's about massacring swarms of dinosaurs, you'd probably think that it's a purely PvE type game. And yet, it's not. Exoprimal's primary form of game mode, Dino Survival, is more like a race or time attack. It isn't necessarily PvP, as for the most part it's just about completing objectives faster than the other team, but there is also at least one element of PvP that you can't avoid, even in the designated PvE mode. And that is a mechanic called the Dominator. This is an item that is a guaranteed spawn for both teams, though it's given earlier to the team that's behind. This item essentially lets you control a large dinosaur and disrupt the enemy team by attacking and killing them. The Dominator is almost always the deciding factor in which team will end up winning. A well-timed Dominator can completely wipe a whole team and cause their objectives to reset entirely. On the other side, a poorly timed Dominator can be an utter waste if the enemy team is prepared accordingly. There is a bit of push and pull with this mechanic, as when a team uses it they are only going to have 4 players working on their current objective. Depending on what role uses it, and the situation, this can cause some very hectic gameplay that can backfire on you as well. Still though, while it's a cool fantasy to control a dinosaur and destroy enemy players with it, it's unfortunate that there isn't a purely PvE mode as a primary means of interacting with the game. The newly introduced Savage Gauntlet somewhat remedies this, but I'll talk about that shortly. The matches of Dino Survival themselves, as I mentioned, are about completing objectives faster than the opposing team. At the end of every match, whether you win or lose, you gain experience for both your overall player level, as well as levels for individual exosuits that you use during that match. Both of these are forms of progression that unlock new customizations for you to upgrade your suits with. If you don't want to spend extra money, and I recommend that you don't, 3 of the available exosuits are locked behind your player level. After you hit the required level, you can purchase them with in-game currency that you earn from simply playing. They're priced surprisingly fairly at only 5,000 bitcoins, and you really shouldn't have too much of an issue accruing that much by the time they're available for you to buy. Exosuit levels unlock suit-specific modules, which are equipable items that allow you to augment your abilities in different ways. This can range from something simple that you don't really think about, to something that changes your gameplay to focus on different things. These modules can also be leveled up and made more powerful for bitcoins, with each level costing more coins until they're maxed out at level 5. There are also generic modules that you can equip on any of your exosuits that you obtain from raising your player level. Spending bitcoins to level these will keep them at that level across all your suits, and they're a pretty cheap investment for a more global potential. Mixing and matching modules while also having a limited number of slots are what will end up varying your gameplay not only from other players of the same exosuit, but also from game to game as you see fit. I do feel, however, that these forms of progression are a bit of a double-edged sword. While it certainly feels good to unlock new things to try out and power up your exosuits in various ways, it also means that you aren't playing optimally for a large duration of time, and you won't be able to try out builds you're thinking of until you unlock the necessary modules later on. With the game's queue sort of just throwing you in with whoever, it feels difficult to properly contribute or compete with players that have their modules maxed out and set up when you're just starting. It also means that getting experience with the exosuit you're intending to level up is more difficult. Either you're making your team's overall composition worse by sticking it out with that suit, or you're swapping off from it and not getting to level it as you were intending to. And, unfortunately, if the game simply didn't have a mandatory PvP component to it, you really wouldn't care about this and it would mostly be a non-issue. More recently, a new mode called Savage Gauntlet was added. This is a mode that pits you strictly against PvE. This is the first week that the mode has been out and it's supposed to have new objectives every week, so I can only base this off of what I played so far, but this mode is moderately difficult. Not overly so, as you can definitely complete it with a team of random players, but it's got some of the higher end monster types and feels more intense from the get-go. Unfortunately, this mode is only available to players that have completed the game's story. For a rough estimate, completing the story takes around 20 to 30 hours, which is somewhere around 60 matches or so. To have the actual PvE mode locked behind that much invested time is certainly a choice. Personally, I would have liked to see this as an alternative way for players to progress their levels and story without needing to have any PvP interactions, but perhaps that's a dream for later down the line. All in all, the base game mode is fun enough to keep you engaged for the short duration of matches. Roughly 10 to 15 minutes of gameplay that can vary every time you queue up because of objectives and maps, and also raids, keeps things fresh and interesting for a good while as you push through the disconnected narrative. Last but not least, I want to touch on the game's monetization. The base game is $60 USD, and there are additional microtransactions as well as a season pass. The additional microtransactions, at least as of right now, are strictly cosmetic. The season pass is filled only with exclusive cosmetics, and you cannot outright purchase levels for it either. After finishing the story, I was already over halfway done with the season pass, so it does seem pretty reasonable to finish it within the 3-month window that it's available for. Exoprimal does have loot boxes, but these are not something that you can buy with real currency. The only way to earn these is from playing the game and leveling up. There are some given to you as you progress to level 50, and every single level past 50 rewards you with a war chest, so you'll be getting a good chunk of these as you keep playing. I have no idea if the game features duplicate items that you can pull from these loot boxes. I've personally never gotten one, though I have gotten bitcoins, so the game might just not tell you that it's because it was a dupe. I will say that the current amount of cosmetics in the game does feel very limited. Whether that's good or bad is obviously subjective, and this will of course only grow over time, so it's more of a minor gripe than anything. My bigger complaint regarding the cosmetics is actually that while there are legendary skins that you can obtain, there actually are not any matching weapon skins. So you're going to look a little goofy because of the contrast there. Again, it's not the end of the world by any means, but it's at least a small negative in my book. Earlier I did mention that 3 of the exo frames are locked behind player level. These are technically purchasable with real money if you don't want to wait. I already said it, but just to reiterate my opinion on this, I'd recommend waiting and buying them with the in-game currency. They are very reasonably priced with bitcoins, and I'd say they aren't worth the $15 USD just to play them earlier. Especially with how you'll most likely be swapping to different exo frames in matches because of team compositions. If you truly can't wait to try those frames out, the practice shooting range in the game actually lets you use these frames and see how they play even before you own them. All in all, I think the monetization of this game, as it currently stands, is pretty okay. The lack of any pay-to-win items in the survival pass, as well as the inability to purchase loot boxes, keep those 2 monetization schemes in check in a way that I think most people would find agreeable and fair. So there you have it, my review of Exoprimal. I think that for a new IP, and new concept of a mishmash of a few genres, it's got a really good base that Capcom can build from. They've already got a roadmap for the first few months of the game laid out, and they're adding new rigs, modules, exosuit variants, maps, and dinosaur types in the near future, so the game seems to be well on its way to becoming something even better. While I do think they should have an actual PvE mode, I think that the way PvP is implemented in the game's main mode is done in a way that won't ultimately deter people from playing. We'll have to see what they do with it, but I'm personally looking forward to the updates and improvements and seeing what this game evolves into down the line. Thanks for watching.